A nearly 40-year-old cold case is heating up in Colorado. In today's True Crime Chronicles, the arrest that sent shockwaves through a small mountain town.
Breckenridge, Colorado is a popular ski town 80 miles outside of Denver. It's in the news for snow totals, not cold cases. Nearly 40 years after the heinous murders of two Colorado women, law enforcement believe they have finally made an arrest in the case. On January 6, 1982, late at night, a passenger aboard a United flight saw lights flashing down below.
Dispatch called and said they had a call from a sheriff up there in the sky that said he saw SOS lights flashing on top of Guanella Pass. Wanted to know if anybody could check it out. I just happened to be the guy that drew the straw to go get up.
That night has stayed with him all these years. A pickup truck was stuck in an embankment. The temperature had dropped significantly, and this was a life or death situation.
He saw me and he freaked out. He said, God, I'm saved. This is why I got drunk and I decided to go home. And I said, you came up over the pass? He says, yeah, well, it seemed like a good idea. And I said, how in the heck did this guy get so lucky to have all that stuff fall into place?
Dave recognized the man he saved. He worked at a local mine. His name was Alan Phillips.
He was a mechanic, I was a miner. I never had a problem with him. We ended up picking up the guy straight out of hell.
Shortly before Alan Phillips was rescued, Barbara Oberholzer and Annette Schnee went missing in Breckenridge and were later found dead. No one knew who killed these two women.
Everybody loves a mystery, and every murder is a mystery. It's an extremely difficult case. I was just trying to do a professional job and solve it.
McCormick has worked on the case almost every day for 32 years, doing everything he could to solve this case.
So we had the leads of 2 or 3 serial killers in Montana, in Idaho.
Years passed, and leads went nowhere. Until one day, Alan Phillips was charged with the murders. He was living behind a popular rest area about 20 miles away from where he almost met his fate.
He's on his own. He's going to have to stand trial.
He got his life saved. He didn't die up there. But he did bad things before that, and he has to pay for them.
A key piece of evidence left at the crime scene, and new technology is what led to the arrest of Alan Phillips. Earlier, Tori Allen Lindsay sat down with 9 News reporter Matt Jablow to discuss the crack in the case. Take a look.
We are here with crime and justice reporter Matt Jablow from KUSA Denver discussing the 1982 Breckenridge murders. Now, early this year, there was a break in the Colorado cold case. Finally, a mountain town has some long overdue closure. So thank you first, Matt. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
On DBL, absolutely. Now, the murders of Barbara Oberholzer and Annette Schnee have gone unsolved for nearly 4 decades. Did you think in your mind, just emotionally, that the killer would ever be found?
You know, once I met a detective who'd been working on the case for about 30 years, yes, I thought it would. A guy named Charlie McCormick. He was a retired Denver homicide detective who moved to Breckenridge in 1976, done with homicide cases, done with police work, he thought, until 6 years after he moved there, these murders happened. And he worked on these cases, this double murder, on a volunteer basis for the district attorney's office and the sheriff's department for more than 30 years.
Wow.
Okay, so my question is, like, what were some of the similarities between Barbara and Annette's murders, and was it obvious that they were killed by the same person?
It was pretty clear pretty quickly to detectives that they were. They were both shot to death, both in the chest, I believe. They were both hitchhiking home from work the day that they were murdered. Which
was a thing people used to do.
Correct. It wasn't a big deal in Breckenridge back in the time. It was a much smaller town than it is now. They were both in their 20s, both young women, and they were murdered, it appears, about 3 or 4 hours apart. So it was pretty clear just about from the jump that these murders were connected.
So what's genetic genealogy? And I want to know also if that bloody glove in this case wasn't found, would the case ever be solved?
It's hard to say. It certainly helped. They needed a DNA sample from one of the victims, and they got one. Genetic genealogy is essentially combining DNA technology with genetics. So a lot of the online genetic services that we all know.
23andMe and stuff, right?
Ancestry.com.
Okay.
When you go on those, I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is when you go on those, you can agree to have your genetics inputted into those databases. So they combine genetic trees with DNA testing so that investigators or whomever can go in there and see which people all over the world are connected by DNA testing.
It's like the new thing in true crime, which is like you can find their family and or see who's related to them and then find them. Okay, talk to me about, I don't even like saying his name, Alan Phillips, whatever. Talk to me about him, but what concerns me is there's seemingly no motive.
Yeah, it doesn't appear so. First of all, I should say that the affidavit in the case is still sealed. He's not gone to trial. We'll know a lot more when the affidavit is released. Alan Phillips is 70 years old now. At the time, he was about 30, if my math is right. He was a miner in a local mine in Idaho Springs, led a very low-key life before and after. After the murders, he was, again, my understanding, never arrested for anything, certainly no major crimes, and he never really left the area. And he lived in a town called Dumont, which is right off of I-70. Anybody who is, and he lived right behind a very popular rest stop off I-70. I started to say that anybody who's ever skied in the mountains in Colorado probably has stopped in that rest stop. There's a Starbucks and a gas station, all kinds of things. And he lived within spitting distance of that rest stop for the last 20 or so years and never lived outside of Colorado.
Wow.
That's
wow.
crazy.
I'm so glad there's closure for Barbara, for Annette, for the town.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, allegedly,
yes.
Again,
Yeah.
we're hoping that there is some kind of closure. At least there's movement, right? On a cold case, that's everything.
Indeed.
Families.
It's good news for everybody.
It is. Thank you so much for coming on here, Matt,
My pleasure.
on DBL.